Hello friends, welcome to Storyteller Conclave. This is a show all about helping you run the best tabletop role-playing game that you can, whether you're a new storyteller learning the craft, or a experienced storyteller looking to take your game to the next level. I am Sarah.
I'm Rob.
How are we doing, Rob?
I don't know, sir. How are we doing?
We're panicking a little bit because the text for that intro that I read every week is not where I thought it was on our show sheet. And
No.
So then I was like, well, I guess I'm doing this from memory then.
Yep.
How'd I do?
I think you did great.
All right, great.
It sounded perfect to me. I don't think there was a single person who had a problem with
You
this.
salvaged the show. Did I
Yes.
mention it was episode 55?
I think you missed that, but it is episode 55.
It is episode 55.
At some point, it's going to just become pointless for us to say what number it is.
No, it's not. No,
You don't
we
think so?
gotta keep the tally.
All right.
We gotta keep the tally.
All right. So we do have a few updates that I'll probably go through real quick. I should go through real quick. Some of you may have seen it on the on Patreon. Others will see it in the channel. Patreon did start charging sales tax. Now, tax is not required everywhere. But it is an international thing that they finally agreed to, and there's some stuff with the EU that had to go in with it. So if you've got questions, there's some links in the Discord, or if you're on Patreon, you can go click on the links there. They're very, very obvious about everything. The long and short of it is I think it's going to be less than 30% of anyone on Patreon is going to have to pay service fee, a tax on it, and most of our listeners are not going to be them. So that's the good news. So... but the
What's the matter?
We're having problems with the MixLR.
Oh no, he's just saying it was annoying. He couldn't find the stream.
Ah, okay. Well, hopefully that it won't affect any of our listeners. But it might, and if it does, just contact us if you've got questions. But it shouldn't, honestly. Beyond that, everything else seems to be going pretty well. I did see that we have some international listeners out there. On our most recent, we got some reporting to us. So if you're listening at us from Brazil, thank you so much for listening.
Yeah, it's great.
We're kind of surprised that we saw that we had some people from Europe as well. So we're glad to have you. Please join our Discord. We'd love to see you chatting in there with our people and adding your own comments from an international location that's different than us.
Absolutely, yeah. We always love a little fresh blood up in the Discord, and join the discussion. And everybody's welcome,
of course. So today we've got some, for lack of a better term, interesting topics.
Yeah, it's a show topic that I saw kind of come up actually in some Twitter discussion. There was some there was some discourse that happened, with a capital D,
but not bad. Just a lot of intrigue, I think.
I mean, I saw an ugly side of it. There was a lot of people who were like, "Oh, this isn't a big deal," and why can't you just enjoy the game without bringing all this politics into it and stuff like that? And frankly, I don't know. I just think if you take the time to examine your story and just figure out where your influences are and stuff like that, I don't think it's a bad thing.
Unless it's part of the story. And what we're talking about is stereotypes, racism, classism.
Yeah.
Appearances in some cases.
The discourse I saw was basically about how orcs are all written as evil.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's classic.
Yeah, well, it is. It's classic. I mean, the thing is, I mean, I think Tolkien pretty much invented orcs.
Pretty much.
I don't think those were pulled from any previous folklore that I know of.
There are Hobbish and Fae that fit a lot of the same themes as orcs. Trolls were a thing.
Hobgoblins, trolls, things
those
like
kinds
that,
of things.
right.
But the term, the concept that we know as orcs, definitely, I would say, was a Tolkien thing.
Or Tolkien, at the very least, hammered it home.
I agree,
and brought it full fledged into the fantasy realm.
Yeah.
And of course, Tolkien's elves or Tolkien's orcs are all corrupted elves. And they're awful, horrible beings that were born in Mordor.
Mm-hmm.
And so, being that they were then moved into Dungeons and Dragons, they were then coded as, like, literally, if you look at the stat block for an orc, it says that they are chaotic evil.
Yes.
The lore behind them in many of the settings has them following and or created by an evil god, and that's why they have these influences and stuff like that.
Right.
And basically, this person on Twitter was just kind of saying, like, maybe having an entire race of sentient beings that is listed as evil, irrevocably, like they're just evil, flat out. There's no discussion about it. There's no option. There's no variance.
Right.
Maybe that's not the greatest thing. Maybe that's a little bit racist, and that maybe having the option of having them have a little, I don't know, societal latitude, a little mobility within their alignment.
Especially when you're talking about a race. That's like saying, I mean, granted, we all say all wasps are assholes, but I mean, you run the risk that there may or may not be a helpful version of the insect wasp out there that is good, that we just haven't found yet because no one has a problem with them. But at the same time, when you're dealing with a whole race that's got multiple cultures and multiple distinctions, some of them may exist in the jungle, some of them may exist in the desert. They're going to develop different cultures. Yeah. Subcultures within that, and those subcultures are going to be vastly different in some cases. So, to say that they are just inherently evil is kind of racist.
Yeah. And I mean...
the statement is at the very least.
And look, here's the thing. I don't think... And I want to say this from the outset, because I don't want this discussion to get the same sort of outcry, spin? I suppose. Okay. The same sort of spin, the same sort of bounce back that I saw in Twitter, and which was, look, we're not saying that if you have evil orcs in your game you're a racist.
No, not in the least.
What we're saying is that as a story element, maybe it requires a little more examination, and maybe when you're putting your story together, maybe that's something you don't need to do.
Right.
Maybe we can work past that, because it does carry a certain message with it.
Right.
And when you view an entire race of thinking people as evil, that's pretty,
I think when an individual does,
yeah,
the individual is racist. But when you write it into a book that this race is just inherently evil, that's the way it is, that's the way the world is designed, that's poor design.
Yeah.
You're not giving reason.
Exactly.
They're like... They sold themselves to demons and only feel hate and anger in their hearts now for eternity.
Well, they're not really sentient thinking beings then, are they?
Exactly. Now we're dealing with somebody who's being puppet controlled.
Yeah, exactly.
We're getting closer to the undead, thrall that's out there. Or a race that follows an edict more and less a sentient existence, And I think when you start examining what you're bringing into a world and why it's important to the story that way, understanding that they have their own thoughts, personalities, existence, families, values. I mean, obviously an evil race, beats their children every day, but how did they have children in the first place? Like...
Right.
Through evil, fornication? Like, how we really got to get deep to get evil all the way to the core.
All the way down, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, to a degree, is it evil or is it just chaotic, mindless things? Like, I kind of, to touch upon another story, not even role-playing related, Firefly had a race of evil creations that wasn't a race. It was humanity that had either gone space mad or had lost themselves, and they were basically just a bunch of crazy people. The real question was, how were they on ships that flew around?
Right.
How did they not all just murder each other and get sucked out into the vacuum of space? There was a lot of empty holes in the design of that race, if you will, or culture,
especially if they were just humans, because you figure a lot of the plot of Firefly had to do with the rigmarole of running even just a simple little Firefly class ship. With 9 people on it or something like that.
Yeah.
I mean,
one part goes out and you're screwed in some cases.
Yeah, exactly. And then you've got Reavers who,
somehow can run an unprotected core and fly through space and catch up with qualified ships and use specialized harpoon-like weapons that, like, where did it's I'm not gonna say it's bad writing, but it's bad world building.
It's okay if you say it's bad writing. It's fine. Look, you can be critical of media, and I think this is another great message to have just overall for our discussion tonight. You can be critical of media without that media being bad. You can still enjoy it and be critical of it.
There are a lot of things that I think are terrible, but I still watch them.
Look, We're
not going to get into that.
I started watching JoJo's Bizarre Adventure.
Oh, man, we are not getting into that.
Okay.
That we would change topics. All right, let's get back to the point at hand.
That is key. It is awful, and I am enjoying the hell out of it.
Fair enough. So let's get back to this. So when we think of, I think our discussion really tonight, let's kind of try and focus on what has existed in the past. Where did it come from? Like, what racism do we automatically have that we don't even realize we have it at times, and that we're preaching when we try and run games and teach games, teach this world to other people. Because I always think that that's funny. That when you teach D&D to someone else and they give you a weird look, like, why is that? And you're like, well, because that's the way it is. And they just give you this, like, that's dumb. And you're like, that is really dumb, actually.
Yeah.
Like, why is that a thing? Like, we have those kind of things. Our existing racism, our tropes that are already out there, and then examine, does that make the story better or worse or easier?
Yeah.
So,
I mean, there's a lot of angles to look at this. So, I mean, what are some of the classic racisms we deal with here? You've got your main sentient races. You get your dwarves are greedy little money grubbing, cave dwelling drunkards
with giant beards
and Scottish accents.
Yes, in most cases. Fake Scottish accents. That's the key.
Because none of us have good Scottish accents.
Nobody does.
Except Matt Mercer. He has an excellent Scottish accent, but he's the only one allowed.
There's a term for that. I think it's brogue. Right?
Yes.
So, elves. They're aloof. They're romantic. They're distant. They're better than everyone.
Snooty. Oh, yeah.
Snooty's a good word for them.
Elves introduce themselves to each other by saying, "Hi, I'm better than you."
Yeah. So, are they all that way? Or, is every elf better than the next elf next to them?
Of course.
Okay.
Of course.
All right.
And that guy?
Yeah.
He's better than the other guy.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Exactly. And 10,000 years ago, he didn't come to my dinner party, so I hate him still.
Yes.
Yeah. Those things. They're almost like really bad vampires.
Oh, God.
Yeah. Isn't that terrible? We'll get to vampires later. Halflings?
Short.
Yep.
Mischievous. Well, short's a physical attribute, but...
Well, so is bearded.
but along with that, mischievous and untrustworthy.
Yes.
I think the Kender did a really disservice to halflings as a whole.
Right.
When Dragonlance came out, because... oh, God, what was that guy's name? The Kender in the main party in Dragonlance.
Oh, God, now you're making me dig.
But yeah, it stole everything that wasn't nailed down and didn't feel bad about it. Yeah.
Yep. Just leaned into the rogue element.
Oh, yeah.
That clearly they are all rogues.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, and yes, I see where you're saying this. They are stereotypes. We are defining stereotypes, but a stereotype is a type of racism.
Mm-hmm. Of course it is.
And really, we're talking about base races here.
Yeah.
And we're defining them based on what we know, and that all of these things we believe to be true are not necessarily true.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't have to be true, but it makes it kind of convenient because then everybody knows and kind of has a general feel of what the world is like.
Sure.
It simplifies things.
Mm-hmm.
We all know that trolls are big and dumb and clumsy.
Mm-hmm.
Almost every single world that we've ever seen in story, in design, in whatever, it's a lumbering troll, and yet they're deadly because they are so big. They're just big, clumsy things like that have boulders for fists. So in that, we are defining something that makes it easier for everybody to come across. That stereotypes, that trope makes it easy.
Sure,
and
absolutely.
makes it accessible.
And I've said it before on the show too, that when you take some of the load off of what your players have to imagine, it makes the game world easier. You're already handing them things like magic and dragons and, larger than life story elements and stuff like that. Possibly the fate of the world and stuff. You're asking them to imagine all of this. So the more that you can relate to them, and the more that they can just easily say, okay, I get that, I understand that.
Mm-hmm.
They can put that aside. It's no longer on their mind as part of their thought load.
Right.
And they can move on.
Right.
So,
and I think that's where certain certain fantasy worlds are easy for people to attach to. Certain genres are easy. Some contemporary stuff is much easier for some people because they just don't want to have to think about the world design.
I'll be dead honest. That's one of the reasons I haven't gotten into Eberron.
Okay.
Is because it is so drastically different from all of the other fantasy realms. Like I fell right into Forgotten Realms. You know, because it's familiar.
Yeah.
The elves are snooty, the dwarves are drunk, the gods are many, and that's what you get.
Yeah.
You know, the giants are big, the trolls are dumb. I get that, but Eberron has so many unique ideas and so much great world building in it, but at the same time, it's really intimidating to look at all that and go, oh god, I'm going to have to relearn a fantasy realm.
You ready?
I'm not going to be able to lean on any of the stereotypes that I already know.
I can't get into Adventure Time for the same reason.
Adventure Time?
The show.
Okay.
I just can't get into it because there's too much going on in the world.
Huh.
Like, you watch it and you're like, I'm trying to just watch the two main characters. That's it. I'm just trying to watch them. And every 5 seconds I'm thrown into, this is what the world is like, and the world is so different. And it's like, how much of this stuff do I have to memorize? That, like, 27 episodes in, I'm finally like, oh my god, the Candy Queen is actually this, and he's a boy, and he's, like, 100,000 generations from where we... Well, what? I'm sorry, this is too much. I can't absorb all of this crap. And especially when, like, someone comes to me and tells, like, oh, you watch Adventure Time. What did you think of blah, 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 blah? And I'm like, I have no idea the words that came out of your mouth. It means nothing to me. And
I understood all of those words individually.
Not to say that it is an amazing show with amazing world building and some unbelievable topics that they crush, but at the same time, I'm like, it's a lot. Like, I have to dedicate. I think Star Wars sometimes is that for people. Where they're just like, who? Ahsoka who? What? What are you talking about? Yeah. There's Han Solo, Leia, Luke. Like, what are you talking about? Who are these other people? Oh, they're part of the Clone Wars. Yeah, that was like, 30 seconds in one of the movies? Like,
Right.
I think Ben talked about it, like, in passing, that he was part of it. And in that, I think it was confusing for a lot of people that now we have all this extra canon. So...
Well, yeah, that's definitely me. Like, I really haven't gotten into any of that stuff. I mean, I'll be dead honest, and I know I'm probably taking a lot of people off when I say this. I don't really care about Star Wars all that much. So like my give an F was not high enough to actually slog through any of that stuff. But yeah, no, that was a barrier of entry for me. Where it's like, oh yeah, this character's this and this character's okay, right? No, I'm checked out already. Like, So okay, we talked about like racial stereotypes and stuff like that. What about class stereotypes?
I think there's a lot of that we can go into.
Do we depend on that sort of stuff?
Well, which part of class are we talking? Are we talking about D&D classes? Are we talking about defined classes by the system? Like, D&D has fighters classes.
Yeah.
And in that sense, the fighters are dumb. And wizards are smart but not wise. And then you have rogues who are stabby. And thievy, and you have your bards who are lore-wise, but, and cultured.
The stereotype of bards is you want to sleep with everybody.
Well, that's, yeah.
Yeah,
and I think that...
The Archlich rises from his tomb. I rolled a seduce.
Yeah. But the question is that, are you then imploring that in your story?
Right. And I really, like, that's honestly one of my favorite aspects of character creation, is trying to think outside of those boxes and thinking of, like, what are fun ways I can make this character that, like bards, for instance. I think bards are a great example. Because there's such vibrant characters, and especially in 5th edition, they've got so many different subclasses where they can express themselves in different ways.
Right.
You've actually got a couple different martial ones, like College of Swords and College of Valor are two really great ones where it actually turns you almost like halfway into a warrior,
Right.
And like I've had bard concepts in the past too, where I know you're supposed to use an instrument, as a spellcasting focus, but there were orators.
Yeah.
You know,
Singers.
They were just
storytellers,
essentially motivational speakers, storytellers, lore
Nothing
masters.
wrong with that,
you know, and like, yeah, okay, they knew how to play instruments because that's just kind of what you pick up when you're a storyteller like that. But you know, your bardic inspiration, all of your spell casting was all poetry,
right?
You know, and you can do just as much with that. And you know, then I had, you know, obviously the choice between persuasion or intimidation. I went intimidation with it.
Mm-hmm.
Because the ability to just look someone in the eye and just
talk them down
and just belittle them and, you know, make yourself, put yourself with nothing more than your words and your attitude into a position that you are over somebody.
Would you say those were cutting words?
Those were cutting words, yes.
But so these are things that we know to be true. These are stereotypes. These are tropes. How do those cross over? Like, and everybody's talking about this, is that you're not necessarily being antagonistic about it. These aren't necessarily coming into the story, but we do bring them into story. We do have players who look at, you know, oh, we've caught this thief. I'm just a rogue. Dude, I literally can pick a lock. Yeah, whatever. You know, I'm a locksmith. That's my job. No, you're a rogue. That means you're going to steal everything. Like, we brought those from the books that tell us about the class into a prejudice in game. And I think that carries straight through. I think everybody knows, and it's terrifying to say it, but I don't think there's been a single game that I've been in that has combat-ready players who understand, like, combat and how it moves, that haven't said when walking into the door, okay, which one's the wizard? We have to take them out first.
Yeah.
Like, is that prejudice? Is that tactics?
I think that one's tactics.
Right. I think when you then take it and you go into something like, and I'm going to say it, there was a great line between two of my players at the table where one literally looked at the other and said, all right, spellbeggar, what do you want? Talking to a cleric. Now, I think that's a little prejudice, but mostly stabby.
Yeah. I
mean, that's definitely cutting in what your statements. But I think when you start using those tropes that are out of the books that we've kind of defined into antagonistic steps in the book, you know, inside of it, whether you're the player or the storyteller. Like, you know, when someone sees a rogue, a roguish type person, and the guards immediately start asking them questions, yeah, that's profiling.
Yeah, like you're literally coming after me because I have daggers on my hip and I'm wearing leather armor.
Right.
That's it. That's
right.
That's the whole thing.
You
didn't see me do anything wrong.
Right.
I'm not in the bad part of town. It's broad daylight.
Yeah.
You know.
You're orange skinned and have tusks. You're coming with us. Why? You're an orc. You're evil. I'm Toby. I work for the butcher. Like, we just got here and I'm literally unloading meat. Is it the meat of humans? No, it's a cow. Look at it. But that's the thing is that when either the storyteller is doing that or players are immediately making assumptions based upon tropes or stereotypes, that's when racism starts rearing its ugly head.
Yeah.
Or classism when you're talking about nobles not giving a crap about people.
I think a lot of people the problem is it's kind of it's almost an off branch of metagaming. You know, because you're thinking about it in terms of a game rather than thinking of it in terms of a story at that point. You know, you're looking at what should be a living, breathing person,
right,
and saying you are a level 4 rogue rather than saying that's Bob.
Yeah.
You know,
I think that's a different way to look at it. Another way is when you is like what I was saying, making it easy. Like you walk into a well-known city, and I'm not even going to explain a world to you. I'm literally just going to paint out a single scene that could be the opening 0. Right? You've got one of the characters, a noble, and I explained to him that he has to go. He's loaning money to one of his uncles, and so the opening scene is him walking to the bank. As he passes through its marble halls with high counters and, you know, adamantine bars in front of goblins, dressed finely in suits, counting stacks of gold as he makes his way to the end. I mean, you know what I'm doing with that scene. There's no question what I'm doing there. Am I being racist to those goblins?
Well, you may be.
I mean, I'm definitely stereotyping them.
Yeah.
You know, at that point, at the end of the counter, when he finally reaches the head of the bank, who is an ugly-looking goblin with spectacles on his eyes, clearly older than the rest of them, commanding them, you know, and you have to negotiate with him to get access to your own funds, through some secret means. Yes, I'm kind of going off of Harry Potter here. Don't dig me into it too far. But again, we're putting it to a point of we're defining who these people are in the world.
Well, I think that actually, I'm glad you brought that example up, because that branches into something else that I wanted to talk about.
Sure.
Which was coding.
Yes.
Okay. Now, coding is, for those not familiar, is a term used to essentially use a fantasy or a fictional stand-in for a real-world demographic. So, yeah, the goblins you just described, you didn't say that they were Jewish.
No.
But you used all of the negative Jewish stereotypes.
Agreed. And I may be using more in my story.
Exactly. And so, is that really something you want to do? I mean, are we using, is that are they coded as that? I don't know.
Well, I think the same could be said in a different kind of coding, and in the sense that a lot of people will look at certain the way people portray certain alien races as very Klingon.
Yeah.
And you're like, okay, well, this is just another Klingon race. Mm-hmm. And now we know everything about them.
Right.
We look at, like, the Ferengi in Deep Space Nine, a whole race that were strapped around a culture of money and acquisition.
Brutal capitalism.
Yeah. But they were all unique. Like, each one of them was different, but still following that mentality. And that in that story, yeah, there was a lot of coding that went into that, clearly, that they were talking about a capitalistic race that had reached an nth degree, but you still had unique characters. You still had unique moments that weren't bent hard against that every time it had to go in that direction. It was stated, it was driven, but it was not the only thing in that story. So in that, I think coding can help a reader, a listener, a player.
It can. The only real danger with coding is that you want to just make sure that you're not leaning on negative stereotypes. It's okay to say, like, okay, so for instance, we run an Elder Scrolls game.
Yeah.
The Redguard,
yes,
are very heavily Arabian coded,
without a doubt.
Okay, their architecture, a lot of their society and stuff like that, they're not Arabian because Arabia does not, the entire Middle East does not exist as we know it in Tamriel.
No,
but they're heavily coded as that sort of society. This, the Nords of Skyrim are very Viking coded. But again, they're not Vikings.
No,
because those lands don't exist. Those stories don't exist in Tamriel.
Right.
But I think the important thing is, though, is that, like, you're not using the negative stereotypes to code the Redguard.
Okay.
They are, dark skin, very Arabian coded. There's none of the, like, I don't even know what
religious zealousy.
Yeah, religious
terrorism.
Zealousy. Yeah, things like that. Like all the negative stereotypes you would think would come out of that. There's none of that. They're a proud warrior race, yes, but they're honorable. They're respected, well liked, seafaring race, things like that. But they're, if you can code things without delving into, all the negative racial stereotypes and stuff like that, and reinforcing that again at your table.
Right. I mean, I'm reading some. Our chat is going crazy, which is great.
Oh yeah.
I love how you guys talk back and forth, and there's a lot of conversation that's a couple seconds behind us, which is neat. And we do have our list of where we're going. But Matt Elf just said, anytime we label something, we put a lot of assumptions around the item person being labeled. This can be streamlined how we recognize and interact with them at that point. And I think that's true. A lot of times, especially storytellers will use, and I've done it in the past, where I've used movie references, people references, culture references. I don't start with that often. I might do it for a visual, just to give some people a visual representation. But I'll never lean so hard as to say, like, it's this person's and all of this negative stuff about them. I'll never lean into that, because that's not what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to give them a good, accurate description and then give them an idea of where that's going. And I've used cultures in the past in a lot of different lights, Romanesque cultures, where, you've got a city, you've got a sanatorium, you've got guards that are well-trained and well-fed and well-armored. That kind of thing gives you an image of Rome in your mind. When you talk about like a standing force that's small but fierce, it feels a lot like 300, where they're all just standing there with spears. Like, again, I'm giving a reference, but I'm not trying to state that they're, anything negative about that group in any way. I'm not re-referencing it, where it's very easy to do that without realizing you're leaning into it.
Yeah. I think world building is hard.
Mm-hmm.
And in a lot of ways, when we search for an answer, when we kind of dig into our muse and go, well, I got to come up with something for this.
Mm-hmm.
Where in my imagination am I going to come up with this? Our subconscious does tend to just hand us the easiest, quickest thing.
Usually, yeah. What we've created.
And so sometimes those quick, easy shortcuts need a little more examination.
Mm-hmm.
Is all. And it's real quick and easy to grab a stereotype and just throw it out there and just be like, it's this.
Yeah.
But, sometimes you do want to, especially when you're defining whole races of people or something like that, you really want to be careful which ones you grab. So.
Right. Yeah, and take your time. I think that's the big thing that the overall moral of our discussion that we're trying to get, or point that we're trying to get across, is take the time to examine why you're putting something in a story. Mm-hmm. Why someone is the way they are, why a group of people are the way they are. Are you doing it because it's the easy way? Are you doing it because it makes sense? Mm-hmm. Or are you crafting something to make sense so that it fits that moment in time?
Yep.
And sometimes you do need to do that because you're trying to get a single point across of, like, why is Wormtail an asshole? Well, his whole culture is an asshole. That's kind of bad.
Yeah.
Like, he probably is a jerk. Let's find out why he's a jerk. Mm-hmm. Let's not just say his whole group is jerks.
Yeah.
And maybe he is the chosen jerk who's going to fulfill something for them like they crafted him up to this point, and boom, you're going to be the one jerk who's going to take care of this problem. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Fine. Design it that way. That's great. No problem with that whatsoever. There have been countless stories where basically someone has been built up that you are the assassin who will kill so-and-so. And we've defined, like, we've been oppressed for 100,000 years and tried all kinds of things, but instead we just made a genetic monster who's going to murder this guy. Mm-hmm. And that's going to solve all of our problems. No, it's not. It's not. That moment's going to create chaos and hell. But you know what? They're dedicated to that mission. Mm-hmm. And that's fine. That's fine. That's a culture.
Yep.
So...
That's one of the things I really liked about the Dark Elves in the Elder Scrolls setting.
Okay.
Is that, again, in most other settings, especially like Forgotten Realms, your Dark Elves are all evil. But the Elder Scrolls setting, I would say they're probably the closest thing to an evil race that the Elder Scrolls has. But there's a lot of culture and world building and a lot of latitude within their society as far as... good and evil and stuff like that.
Yeah.
They tend to be unscrupulous about things.
Mm-hmm.
They tend to value power over much else.
Mm-hmm.
But, to say that they're all evil as a race, absolutely not. And the reasons why that their cultures were made that way, was, very, very well defined in the lore. Mm-hmm. Reaching out to the Daedra, in some of the more, I would say, evil Daedra.
Okay.
To forge them in fire, essentially.
Right.
If we have these gods at our back,
right,
who's going to mess with us, honestly?
Exactly. Right.
But then even then, those guys have what they call the House of Troubles. Mm-hmm. And that's 4 very evil Daedra that they're like, okay, by the way, yeah, sure, we may worship Azura, Mephala, and Boethia, mm-hmm. which are arguably harsh. Mm-hmm. But you don't touch those 4 because they are literally nothing but murder and death and awfulness.
Right.
Nothing good will come from touching those 4. So even they've got limits to, like,
mm-hmm. Yeah, where they sit, yeah.
Right.
So that makes sense. So I guess what it comes down to is, and the group has kind of put this out there, is do we accept this level, do we accept levels of classism and racism to make it easy for our players to mm-hmm. be in our worlds, to simplify the world?
I think at a certain point it doesn't it oversimplifies it.
I agree.
I think you need to trust your players. I think a little story, what am I trying to say? A little complexity in your story is not something to be afraid of. You don't have to go into 2,000 years worth of history as to why your orcs aren't evil, but just allow for the latitude that they aren't, and give them a little thought to how their society is instead of just saying, "Oh, they're just evil marauders,"
Right.
and go from there. And I think you'll find your players will enjoy that a little bit more.
So I'm going to bounce back to a question that Matt L threw in, because he was hoping to get this in at previous shows.
Yeah, sure.
But it fits here, I think, really well, and that is, most of us engage in RPGs for entertainment. Would you consider running a game with players interested in the topic of exploring serious issues associated with race, species, class, poverty and wealth, not class character class, and other demographics?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
I think if players were interested in it, totally. I mean, there are some games out there, for instance, I know there is a superhero game that focuses on family life and personal struggles.
Okay.
Like literally the superhero aspects of it, because you're a teen in it. You're basically one of the
Teen Titans sort of thing?
Sort of, but less Teen Titans, more of New Mutants.
Okay.
If you're familiar
Young
with
Avengers.
the difference. Yeah. Where they're struggling like hell to keep their identities and who they are and like secret and still have a normal life.
Sure, okay.
Less Peter Parker, striding through school like it's no big deal, and more like struggling day to day with identity. And your powers and everything else that's going on in existence.
Sure. Being a teenager is tough enough, let alone throwing superpowers into that
exactly.
mix.
So when you got something like that, and that's what the game is centered around, is those types of struggles. I think that you could easily throw in the other elements of classism and racism and the examination therein.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because when you're dealing with, once you step away that combat is not the conflict, that evil really, whatever the evil is, bad guys, that kind of stuff, that's literally other parts of the story. That's the background. That's what we would consider, gear maintenance of D&D, like, oh, we've got to go to the store and get more arrows and spells and things like that. Like, that's combat in these games.
Yeah.
The real struggle is, oh crap, I came home and I'm an hour late.
Dad's going to be pissed.
Well, is Dad going to be pissed and take away your iPhone because you're rich and you won't have car rights? Or do you get home to a drunk? And now the door's locked. You don't get to come in the house.
Yeah.
Because he's already passed out on the couch. So do you try and break in? Or do you go stay somewhere else? And those are the kinds of struggles that these games put forth. And it really does shine a light on those other pieces.
Yeah, yeah.
Because you have players who are rich, players who are poor, and that makes a huge difference there.
I think the big question is, and really this is per group to decide. I don't think there's any right answer here.
Oh, no, yeah.
Are you playing a tabletop role-playing game to escape or to confront?
Yeah.
I think a lot of my gaming is to escape. I would say I'm an expert at escapism. It's honestly probably one of my biggest defense mechanisms. I don't like confronting, but at the same time, though, there were characters that I made specifically to kind of do table therapy for aspects of my life and stuff like that I kind of want to I want to tell a story about, and maybe this time I want to get a good outcome.
7C for me was escape, pure escape. I wanted candy and fun, and I threw in occasional moments of craziness to have reason of why this was challenging. But it gave me that escapism. When I play in your games, I feel it is much more of a day-to-day kind of grind feel to a degree. And that your stories are as meaningful as the players push them to be.
Okay. Yep.
You're setting a world out and saying, okay, what meaning are you taking from this moment? And we create it, and then you follow it.
Yeah.
You kind of, if we push it in this direction, you're there to just kind of hold the edges to keep it flowing in a direction. and we're pushing the flow.
I'd say that's fair.
And that flow is stress or anxiety or whatever else we're pushing against it. And you just kind of keep it going in the direction. Whereas, and forgive me, on my games, I tend to do more of a lighthearted, here's an image of something. Let's paint some fun. Let's paint by numbers.
Yeah.
So, where I don't want people to be stressed at the end of my games.
Yeah, exactly.
I want them to feel like they've come through something and enjoyed it. And if it does get to a stressful point, that there's a way out. There's another moment out.
I feel like as I've gotten older, my attitude on this has changed a lot too. Like I think back in my 20s, I was far more willing to sit down and play World of Darkness.
Okay.
And like, no, it's the World of Darkness. Throw all those gritty things at me, Let's all be edgelords at the same time, at the same table,
Yeah.
Throw all the sexism and racism and stuff like that in there, and I've got superpowers, so I'm gonna go punch this guy in the face,
Right.
But I think as time has gone on, I've realized that maybe I don't want that kind of game anymore. I kind of do want the escapism, I want at the end of the day to be able to conquer the evil and say we were the victors, we were the good guys. And feel good about that, and not have to deal with, such mundanities as racism and sexism and classism and stuff like that. Like,
I think there are aspects of villainy in games.
Yeah, and
there are aspects of a shitty world in games. I think Shadowrun does a good job of it.
Yeah,
that you've got runners who are struggling against it, but those runners are all struggling against it somewhat together.
Yeah.
And there may be some discussions in between them, because you might have a rich person in there who's in it for the fun, whereas you've got another runner in there who's trying to survive in a world that hates them.
Yeah.
And that's trying to kill them on a day-to-day basis.
Absolutely.
And I think that's where things like, where we talk about aspects like reputation, and how reputation can be used in-game against NPCs even. Powerful scenes in 7th Sea where you might have a character like in Vodacce slap his Vidova, his second wife, who basically is just there to have a child for him, but he would never touch his courtesan. And the player set up a situation where in court he slaps his courtesan, not realizing that he did it. And now that person's out. Like like you don't do that. You can't, unless you're like ridiculously powerful, and then nobody questions why you did something evil and wrong.
Yeah.
I think reputation can come around in that direction too, just as much as it can in any game. I think you can use reputation to turn some of those things in a logical manner where people start agreeing with it. Or use it in even in some of the historical stuff that 7th Sea puts in there, where there is a lot of racism and classism, but it's a historical setting.
Right, yeah. I think 7th Sea does its best to try to emulate, was it 18th century?
Yeah.
Yeah, 18th century Europe, as much as it possibly can. So you do have those things baked into the story just simply because it is trying to give you almost like a Black Mirror sort of, analog to 18th century Europe.
And how it can be changed.
Right.
So, all right, let's hit some questions before we lose our time here.
Yeah, absolutely.
We get some good questions.
All right, where do you want to go?
I want to start with Sam.
Okay.
Normally I see goblins and orcs being used as the enemy, and it seems that they aren't in a good light, even in the books too. Are there any situations that they are seen as good or helpful?
Yeah, absolutely. I talk a lot about my Elder Scrolls setting, and the Elder Scrolls has orcs as a playable race.
Yeah.
They're actually technically elves. That were strongly tied to one of the older gods, Trinimac. Trinimac was essentially assaulted, killed, and eaten by another Daedra named Boethia.
Yeah.
And in a grand act of betrayal, there's a lot of story that I'm washing over here.
Right. But they're
essentially, yeah. When Trinimac went through this ordeal and was eaten by Boethia, was essentially purged out to the other side as a twisted abomination known as Malakath, which then essentially turned him from this pinnacle god of goodness into the god of vengeance, and also known as the pariah god. Along with him, his people made this change and were turned into the green-skinned orcs.
Right.
Since then, they've kind of gotten the ass end of society. Everybody has tried to kill them, which leads to a real chicken and egg question for me of, would people be trying to kill them if they weren't tied to a god that is the pariah god?
Right.
Does he bring that misfortune on them? Or do people legitimately just hate the orcs for actually good reasons? I don't know.
Right. I think, in my world that I've been working on, I have history. So I have a timeline of when orcs were one way and orcs are goblins were one way and goblins are now a different race almost totally. Yep. They're very supportive because they found where they fit and people accepted them for who they were. And so now they're a different race and my players are struggling with it. They're like, who? What? No, we got to kill those things. No, they're fine. They're fine. What do you mean they're fine? And that's the difference there, is that it depends on how the portrayal. I've seen a few other worlds where goblins are very supportive. World of Warcraft has goblins that are not necessarily evil. They're just a race. So I think there are a lot of elements out there where you can see goblins, orcs, as different races, as powerful races, as controlling races, that are not just one-sided evil.
I saw a really great breakdown. I think it was somebody up on Tumblr was talking about this exact concept of goblins as an evil race, and thinking like maybe goblins aren't evil; they're just misunderstood. From the standpoint of their cultural norms are so different from ours, and things that are normal in their culture are strongly taboo and fought against in ours and seen as offensive.
Right.
So we think of them as thieving little jerks, but what they really are is they just a society with no concept of personal belongings.
Correct.
Like,
if it's not physically on you, you don't value it.
What do you mean you own that?
Right.
I don't understand.
It's not a word that we have.
Yeah, it's not a word we have. If I need it, I just take it.
Right.
And if somebody else needs it, they'll take it from me too.
Right.
And that's just society. That's just how we function because we're a collective.
Yeah.
There was a semi-autonomous commune.
That's right. We take it in turns. But one of the things that I thought was interesting is that somebody had asked, and I want to say it was probably related to that, but it came up on Reddit, was goblin artifacts, things that they legitimately craft, because there has to be crafters. There has to be someone who's making quality items.
Sure.
Why aren't there any? And the reason being is maybe their culture reveres those most of all, that they're hidden, locked away behind walls that they've built because they made it. And that's super powerful to them.
Yeah. It's quite possible.
And I think that would be neat if you created an actual tomb or a dungeon for goblin crafted things that are protected, a goblin hammer, like the first goblin hammer.
You've never seen a goblin hammer for the same reason you've never seen the inside of a pharaoh's tomb.
Probably for the same reason. Yeah. All right, let's grab another one.
Okie doke. Let's see here. Technolich asks, there has been a lot of talk lately about races being codified forms of real-world racism. Some have even gone so far as just doing away with racial stat adjustments. Any thoughts on this? I think if you're talking like physical differences, I don't think those are stereotypes. I think those are actual physical differences. Like cats. Me saying a cat always lands on its feet is not an aspect of racism or racial stereotyping on cats. It's literally just a biological function they have of being able to twist their bodies and reorient them. Like, it's science. There is a certain aspect of that. Now, if we're talking subset of the same species,
right?
It's one thing if we're talking like dark-skinned humans versus light-skinned humans. Okay, let's not go there.
Subterranean cultures versus surface cultures.
Sure.
Sky cultures.
Sure.
I think there's some biological differences there. You could be like, well, subterranean cultures are going to have different eyes. And basically they get, advantages in subterranean areas. They can see better, but also in sunlight, they have problems.
Sure.
You could say the same thing for hot and cold areas.
Yeah, the Nords of Skyrim come from Atmora, a place north of Skyrim, which is known to be a frozen wasteland.
Correct.
And they're inherently resistant to cold.
Right.
They wear a t-shirt when it drops below freezing because it's starting to get a little A little chilly.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll wear long sleeves today.
If they see things dripping because ice is melting, they're uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Like this. Can we get a breeze?
Oh God, it's the thaw. Whew. Yeah. I'm gonna need a beer to cool myself off.
Exactly. So yeah, I think that some racial adjustments or cultural adjustments based upon region and build. Yeah, I think biologically you could have some of those things, but I think there are,
especially when we're talking about things like literally physically different races,
right,
like dwarves and elves.
But if you're talking about like a charisma modifier, you're prettier.
Yeah.
Or you can talk nicer.
Yeah.
Like, are you saying that because your average lifespan is 4 times the span of mine, you're better at talking than I am?
I assure you, I can be just as much of a disaster in social situations 100 years from now as I am today.
Exactly. And I think that's where things start to, like, wisdom, charisma, things like that start to bother me a little bit there.
Yeah.
All right. Knox threw a question at us.
I love how you typoed this and you wrote box in a box.
I did. Because I was quick typing on my tablet, which
You're
is
spending
terrible.
too much time down here in the basement.
I'm also drinking. Is it unreasonable expectation to ask your DM not to oppress your character by means of the world and the NPCs when the race of your chosen character is one that may be canonically held in poor reputation? Can't I just play a drow or a tiefling or a goblin and not be also harassed in my fantasy escape when I might be getting enough of that in real life? Is this just the price of admission you need to pay for playing those races?
No, absolutely not.
No, I think it's reasonable to ask.
Yeah.
I think if you're gonna be playing in a game and they've outlined the world and they've outlined where the races are and what it fits in, and you're like, I really wanted to play this race because I like the attributes and I like some of the things about it. Do they have to be hated like this? Mm-hmm. I don't think that's something bad to ask a DM.
I don't think so either. And I think any responsible storyteller is going to handle topics like that in a session 0. You know,
yes.
Like I said earlier, are we playing this game to confront or to escape?
Yeah.
And I think if you're playing to confront and you still decide, if you all decide that those will be aspects, that you're going to play a little more gritty, a little more possibly realistic, I suppose, where there are hateful elements in your society and such like that, and you still decide to play one of those NPCs, then, okay, maybe that is the price of admission. But honestly, the storyteller could just not.
Yeah.
It's that easy to
Yeah.
just not single you out for physical attributes or racial attributes or things like that, and just continue with the story.
And if you're a storyteller who has a race, maybe you've picked one of the races, like you're doing a D&D game, and you're saying, okay, I have a specific race in this area that I'm going to be affecting, and they're affected this way, and so I need them to be a certain way because the culture has done a certain thing. Sure. Like, if it's a local thing, like, these people are being oppressed here. Like, there's slavery, and they're the people who are being enslaved. Now, that's going to be very important in the story, because they could be freed, they could just be glossed over, but it's an important aspect that slavery is happening here.
Sure.
And it's not just their race, but their race is one of the ones that are heavily involved in it because it's this area. And your player's like, well, I don't want to be considered a slave person. Okay. Let's talk about how you got out of slavery.
Yeah.
And that they value the fact that you're out of it. Like, maybe people look at you like, well, you were a slave once, but you're not anymore, so...
Exactly.
You've earned your right to be where you are. Let's talk about what that means.
Exactly.
And
I think that, it also kind of comes down to, the whole X card thing. Where, if you find that, the story is moving in a direction where you're uncomfortable with how it's doing that, you're not enjoying that aspect of your character anymore, I definitely think every table should have the option to just X card that and just be like, okay, no, I'm not. I kind of know what I signed up for when I started making this character,
right?
But now that it's playing out, I'm not comfortable with it anymore.
Yep.
And I'm finding I'm really not enjoying it. Can we talk about this?
Sure. And then you can lay out a whole bunch of different options.
Absolutely.
Different character,
Absolutely.
Different situation, move from the area, whatever. Number of ways to handle that situation.
Yeah.
All right, grab another one.
Alrighty, we're gonna go right back up to Technolich, who asks, I have a draw to weird characters. Usually the less human, the better. What are some ways to work with a player's desire to embrace their inner alien without derailing the game? I think a lot of what I tend to do, because we have a Khajiit, a cat person, in our group. What I tend to do is just, as I'm describing scenes, and I'm describing possibly how things affect them, I lean directly into her feline aspects. I'll describe how things feel on her hair. I'll describe how her whiskers are standing on edge. I'll describe something, tickling at the tip of her tail. Things like that will put her back into the mindset that she's not a human woman, that she's portraying a Khajiit at my table.
Yes. I like how you do that, and I think that's an important part of just general storytelling perception, that when you're talking to your players directly and you're giving them their version of the perception, not necessarily a general, you'll probably do that in most ways, but if a player's going into something, give it to them from their perspective. And I think that helps get them into that character type. So, I mean, if they want to play an alien type race, lean into it with them.
Oh, yeah.
There's no reason why an alien race can't be played into something, and people can't treat them with oddity, with the same indifference as the Uncanny Valley. It doesn't mean it's being stereotyped or raised. Yes, you could put that in the story, but it's not an important aspect of it.
No.
It's not part of they're not that part of the story, unless that player says, I want to overcome this in the story. Like, that's one of my goals. Like, maybe if they're writing their goal sheet, because I know I'm trying to think of a couple games that have that, where it's like, okay, my goal for this week, like Mouseguard has, is to overcome the stereotypes of my community that, mind flayers are all evil, brain sucking creatures. Okay, that's your goal? Yeah, that means I got to put it in the story. Shit. Okay. Let's get started. And now you have that, but if the player's not asking for it, don't put it in there. Just have, you could still have people who are just as you're walking down the street, and your tendrils are going everywhere, that a mother may grab their child and pull them off to the side, and you come over there and present the child with a little doll, and the mother's like, oh, okay. I just wanted her to get out of the way of the fighters, Oh, it's not this? No. Actually, she kind of likes your tendrils, tendrils, And that's the thing is that if you don't want it to have an aspect in your story, don't have it be an aspect in your story.
What am I had a long time ago when I first met Draven, one of our Patreon members was dealing with a Mind Flayer character, and actually grabbed him by the tentacles and lifted him up. It was like, do you guys actually have mouths under there? And I still remember that to this day. One of my funniest moments of it.
No, I think there are definitely aspects in any game where you have players who like playing different things, or who have players who stick to specific character classes or designs, and they want to stick with that, and that's fine. Lean into it. Let them be that in that world.
Yeah,
they may want to do that all the time. Like, you might have a player who always wants to ride horses, even in space. Whatever, it happens.
We'll figure it out.
We'll figure it out.
We'll do some math.
Space wolves, whatever. Make it happen. And I think that's really where we need to remember that our players are people, and that we don't have to incorporate stress that isn't necessary in it. That just remember the stress levels of where everybody's at.
All right, I think we got. It's a good time to wrap up. Our next week's topic is going to be about min-maxing.
Yes.
When is the right time and when is the wrong time to min-max your character in Power Game at the Table? So you can find us on Twitter at @ST_Conclave, Instagram at @ST_Conclave. On MixLR, thank you for those of you listening live right now, and you can find us at 7 p.m. every Wednesday night, Eastern time, 7 p.m. Eastern time, mixlr.com/storyteller-conclave. And on Discord. You can find the Discord link up on our website, and you can find it in our Twitter account as well.
Yep.
Join the discussion there.
Yep. Thank you so much to our Patreon members who are being so kind to us, especially Knox in the Box, Sam, and the Arcane Asylum. We really appreciate everything you're doing for us.
Big shout out to you guys.
Our intro music is Beyond the Warriors by Geefrog. You can find that at geefrogmusic.weebly.com. Our outro music, which you're hearing now, is Only Our Footprints in the Sand by Midair Machine. You can find that at soundcloud.com/midairmachine/tracks.
And I want to give a big shout out, as always, to our families, Vicky and Sean. Today is my 8th anniversary.
Happy anniversary to both of you. You and Sean, definitely.
Love you, sweetheart. All of our friends who've sat with us at our tables over the years, and to you, our listeners, every single one of you, thank you. We love you.
Love you guys.
Good night.
Good night.